Hey Deep Chatters, I'm Leah Morris here with my co-host Jennifer Butler, and this is Deep Chats Podcast, where we have raw discussions about real life. Each week you can expect unfiltered, no BS conversations from the heart about topics that actually might matter to you. We're just a couple of relationship coaches who want to cut through the small talk and dive deeper. So thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode.
Hi, Deep Chatters. We are here for another week to be with you. And it's an emotional week. It's a heavy week. It's also a week of a lot of action. And Leah and I just wanted to get on here and have just a really honest and heartfelt conversation about everything that's going on since the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. And those are just the most recent three names to add to the top of a very, very, very long list of murders that have been happening to people of color for far too long. So, we just wanted to come on here and talk and have a vulnerable conversation about what's happening and how we can begin to heal and how we can begin to really bridge the gap, because it's our responsibility to heal ourselves so that we can reach out in compassion and love to others. So thanks for joining us. And Leah,
Yeah, I think and maybe this is how many people are feeling, don't know where to begin. And also realizing that, again, I think I've seen a sign recently, one of my friends had, or something along the lines of, it's a privilege to learn about racism rather than experience it our whole lives. And I think that just the fact that a lot of white people, and when I'm saying white people, I also am including myself, anybody who isn't Black, I think, doesn't know where to begin. There's a lot of confusion because it's like all of these these generations and systems in place that have raised us to turn a blind eye and to not know. And so now that it has been drawn to our attention in such a big way, I think there's this sort of shell shock that's hit a lot of people of like, well, okay, what do we do? So I'm kind of feeling like I got to start at ground zero with everything. And it's extremely humbling for sure. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Everyone's going to be starting from a different place. And I think that that's okay. Like if we can remove judgment and just let everyone start where they are. Some people have never, because of white privilege, because of the color of their skin, they've never even had to think about it, right? It's never even had to cross their mind. And for that person, it might be really just first and foremost, being curious and opening books and finding resources that can just begin to educate you on, what the reality has been for Black and brown people walking this earth as Americans for too many years, and for some of us, it might be that, we have noticed and we have been aware and we've been trying to do what we can, but now it's like, okay, then this is the next step, right? Like, I need to use my platform. For me personally, I haven't been loud enough about it. I haven't spoken up about the injustices that I see and how hurtful I feel it is. I haven't spoken out other than to my corner of the world and sat in the discomfort and the pain that I feel instead of using it for action, right? And so I think it's just, we have to give each other permission to just be where you are and take whatever steps you need to take so that you can start expanding and growing and bridging this gap that exists.
I love that. Start where you are. And I think we are all in different places. What really does frustrate me is though I'm in conversation with a few groups of all groups of my friends about this, and we're all starting in different places. And then within those groups, each individual is starting in a different place. And I can see those of us who are starting, like are in the infancy of it, and don't realize the ignorance. And those of us who are not in it, in our infancy in learning about this, are shaming those people. And I understand that the frustration, but it's also, I feel without that level of compassion in all directions, compassion everywhere, is like just compassion blanketed over all of this. But especially when we're trying to educate one another and become educated as a collective, that shame really severs the ability for us to communicate clearly and effectively so that change can happen. And that really, I don't know if you've seen any of that or how you feel about that, but that's a bit of a frustration for me. And I think maybe I have a sensitivity, privileged sensitivity to it because I'm biracial. And so I have this inner conflict in my consciousness going on all the time.
Yeah.
I have a white dad and I have a Asian mother who immigrated here. And so there's this part of me that feels that sense of racism and who has experienced, and as a woman too, some oppression. But then there's another part of me that's like feeling guilty also for not knowing how privileged I am. And I don't know, it's just, there's a lot of conflicting things going on in my head. So when I see that sort of a conversation happening, it's really hard to watch. Like, how can we have conversations that are more effective while not ignoring the emotion behind it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, I put up a post yesterday. It wasn't my post, it was somebody else's post, and I reposted it about the way we respond to one another, in the narcissistic ways that we respond, in this instance, to racism, to conversations about race. And, it was things like, well, in my experience though, or, just really negating, there's this narcissistic way, whether you're talking about racism or anything, that when you're in conversation with somebody, you preemptively negate their experience before you start speaking. And I think that as a collective, unfortunately, that happens a lot, especially when it comes to things like this, where I'm in my white skin. I haven't walked in a person of color's shoes. I don't know, and I will never know what that feels like. And I have no right to negate anything that a person of color says to me, whether I believe it to be true or not, or can understand it or anything. So there's a way that we can allow one another to speak and even disagree without negating a person's human experience. And I think that's what's most hurtful. I'm not sure, you know, even as a woman, right? If I think about this as a woman, we have experienced oppression, and gosh, it's more rampant now than I think I've ever experienced in my life, again, under this current administration. I think that even as a woman, if I'm having an intelligent conversation with a man who's able to respect my experience and honor, and maybe disagree with me, but honor that my experience is mine and it deserves to be heard and given space. I think then I can be in conversation with that person on a level that allows us to maybe expand and grow and learn and whatever, but we have to stop negating people just because we don't know what it's like.
Yeah. Yeah. And vice versa, too. I think as far as like, I just want all my white friends to like get on the same page too. And me included. And so like, I also realize like there are so many blocks in our ability to fully understand and get on that same page. And in an effort to, and maybe this is just my like coach nature, in an effort to help guide people to that, I don't also want to like negate the fact that they have been sort of brainwashed. Like these conversations are gonna be like super messy and super, there's gonna be things said, I feel, that are like very ignorant, but I don't want for us to stop there, right? I want to like push through that discomfort without there being too much anger coming from me, at least, and like more understanding of like, look, I get that you don't understand. I get that this is why you might feel that way, but let me continue to show you how I'm educating myself and how you might educate yourself as well. And I like that you said that, like, and maybe I think conversations in general have a way, like we're constantly coming back to like how this applies to me, how this applies to me. I mean, I do it all the time. So, yeah, just coming to a place of listening, like active listening, and understanding that we don't understand each other right now, but that we are hoping to get closer to that.
Yeah.
With one another. I feel like I just went off on a tangent. I feel like, go ahead.
No, I mean, well, I feel like just kind of continuing on with what you said, just with you being a coach, and I was thinking about this today. I think that those of us who are further down the path of consciousness, especially if we're in the white skin, I feel like we have to give up the idea that we can just be like, oh, well, forget it, this is too hard, or I'm just gonna like defriend all the people who don't agree with me on Facebook, right? Or I'm gonna no longer speak to my family members who don't get this. And believe me, I've had my moments where I'm like, this is an issue that I'm not sure I can look past if somebody is standing on this white supremacist soapbox, right? Like this might be the thing that I don't know how to see beyond, but I am going to try my darn hardest to stay in it and be really uncomfortable. Because if I don't stay in the conversation, if I don't commit to doing my best to teach and to inspire and to provide wisdom, then who is? It's certainly not any person of color's responsibility to teach any of us, especially somebody who's that far over. So I feel like that's where we need to pick up the ball. Like where we drop the ball, we can pick it up there. It's our job not to say, well, screw it, I'm not going to talk to those people anymore. I feel like it's our job to really step into this discomfort and be like, oh, God, I'm going to put myself in a really icky, awful position, because that's one way that I can advocate. That's one way that I can take action. I can be a pillar of truthful information, right? Even if we're talking facts, right? Like Black history has been rewritten in our history books, rewritten and written out, right? Like it doesn't even exist. And it's been told in this way that is so not truthful and just feeds into this cultural stereotype and racism and privilege and all of that. So even if it's to just show facts, because the facts are not what we're taught in this country. And I just feel like that's our job. Like we have to step up now. Yeah, it sucks. It's uncomfortable. You know, we were talking about this before. I'm tired and exhausted, but I can't even imagine how tired and exhausted anyone who's been walking around in this country with brown or Black skin feels right now. It's nothing in comparison.
Yeah, I think speaking of like facts, I think like that might be the easiest in. Okay, like let's get rid of emotion. Okay, fine. You'll never feel that. You'll never have total empathy for that because how could you? But like, let's at least talk about facts. I think that's a great starting point. And even just to share that, and you'd hope that eventually we could come to a point where the empathy is so real too, and that we wouldn't be having to have this conversation in another 30 years again, you know, or however often it just but yeah, I think it is our responsibility to be able to pick up that ball where we've dropped it, for sure. And I mean, I guess I can speak to this topic from having brown skin too, but also being extremely privileged and not Black. And I think a lot of conversations also that I'm having are with people who can relate to me, who are like, well, I'm a minority. I'm a this, I'm a that. And it's, you know, all lives matter. And it's like, it's not, that's not the point of this. And you're missing the entire point, in fact. And I'm hoping that, like, you know, us having this conversation today and maybe us each being able to talk from where we're at can hopefully inspire some perspective shifts. But what I feel is that, you know, I'm actually reading this book right now. It was recommended to me by a friend called Me and White Supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a workbook with journaling prompts, like a 28 days of journal prompts that you can dive deeper into ways that you have been navigating the world through this white supremacist perspective. It is so uncomfortable to listen to and so necessary, because I think that before these things were all drawn to my attention, and before I started diving into this book and trying to educate myself and trying to hear and listen and understand, I think there was a part of me that's like, hey, well, I'm brown. I don't have to say much on this. Like, I actually don't know what to say. I don't know how to feel, because part of me does feel like I've experienced racism, because I have. And then part of me does feel like I've experienced privilege, because I have. And like, this goes so much deeper. Like, what we're talking about today goes so much deeper than what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the rest of my life, potentially stood behind my biracialness. But when it comes down to it, I think that there's parts of me that are like, well, if I can be and I'm saying this not because everybody feels this way, but just because this was my reality. If I can be more white in my biracialness, then I can be more accepted. And like, I think I've played that card. Like, I've definitely played that card. And I think, even my mother, who is an immigrant from the Philippines, raised us to be more Americanized. She didn't teach us, and I say Americanized as white, but she didn't teach us how to speak her language. We have, no decorations really, except for like in the downstairs, like, den of our home. But everything is like white. And so I was raised to really like try and embody that more. And I think that has played in my favor as a privileged woman of color. And so I can't even say that I understand fully or have full like knowledge about how deep this goes. But what I can do is start to learn and educate myself on all of these blind spots that I have. Like, Jesus Christ, like I can't even, I feel like I'm scratching the surface. So, and I just wanted to say that because I think that that's a misconstrued thing that's happening right now that I know I've dealt with, is like, wait, how do I navigate being brown and being privileged? Where do I stand here? Oh, I need to learn more.
Yeah.
I need to educate.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really, we all need to learn more, right? We all need to be willing to learn. And I think too, like, yeah, there's so much emotion and there's anger and anguish and pain and built up resentment and so much, right? There's so much emotion. And I think there's this tendency when we get uncomfortable to blame something outside of ourselves, right? Like, I'm feeling scared, so I'm going to blame the protests or the riots or the uprising or whatever you want to call that. I'm feeling angry, so I'm going to, blame this person over here. And, this is what I teach my clients, and it's the same applies now. That discomfort is your biggest learning tool. The discomfort, if you stop keeping your focus outside of yourself and what's making you uncomfortable, and instead look inside and go, own your discomfort, own it. What's making you feel uncomfortable? Is it, that there's some privilege being poked at? Is it some feeling of unsafety? Is it that you feel unworthy to speak up? Like, each person is going to have something different inside of them being triggered from whatever's happening in the world and feeling uncomfortable for their own reasons. When you look at that and you own, okay, what is it inside of me that's making me feel uncomfortable? And then you heal that. Then you say, okay, what do I need to do so that I can feel peace inside myself and heal this part of me? Then you can look in within yourself with love and compassion and as a healed human, and then extend that out. Then you're no longer in the state of fear and anger and blame. So it's like, again, like just lean into that discomfort, because it's like the biggest gift we have right now is the fact that you're feeling so uncomfortable, right? Use it as a tool to like learn what you need to heal, because it's nobody else's fault that you're feeling the way you feel. Right? And it's not your fault. It's not about fault. It's about, okay, where's your wounding? And here's an opportunity for you to heal it. And then empower yourself, and then empower others.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of message that we give most of our clients in the daily work of transformation, is to sit in the discomfort and find the lesson so that you can grow past it. And I feel like that message is now more than ever where we can begin. And then last night I was watching 13, which I know you've watched the whole thing. I haven't watched the whole thing.
13th. Yeah.
13th. Okay.
Yeah.
Mind blowing. The 20 minutes. Yeah. The 20 minutes that I watched, mind blowing. Just so many veils are being lifted.
It should be required watching for this entire country.
I mean, what would you take away from that, from like as the main message from that movie?
You know, it's funny. I watched that movie years ago, a couple times, and the thing that always sticks with me from that movie is how racism and injustice for Black and brown people is built into the structure of our entire society. It is built into the fabric of this nation. We are built on racism. We are built on certain people being less than or below or not equal. You know, what always is so interesting to me, and I don't understand how people can't see, is Black people were slaves. One day they were not, right? Like slavery was abolished. No, Black people aren't slaves anymore. And I wish people would allow themselves to feel into that, because it's not like white people all over rejoiced and said, "You're free, you're among us, come to dinner, here's a job," right? No, they were pissed off. And so the justice system, criminal justice system was created, right? Policing happened so that we could legally enslave Black people, right? And so when you go back to that moment, it can be taken all the way back to that moment, right? When we started arresting Black people because they crossed at the wrong side of the street and threw them in jail, right? Oh, new law, you can't cross the street there, right? Like, and then you create this entire generation. And then how is any generation beyond that supposed to get out from under that, right? So like, I think that movie, if you can open your mind and let down your defenses and let down your guard that anyone's trying to take anything away from you, like owning white privilege and being willing to say, yes, I have white privilege and I've benefited from it my whole life, doesn't mean you're no one's trying to take anything away from you, right? Like no one's trying to rob you of the things you've overcome, the challenges that you've somehow, gotten to the top of a mountain when nobody thought you would. Like nobody's trying to take that away from you. We're just asking, I think it's just asking of yourself, can I look at somebody else and recognize that their challenges have been different than mine? And in some cases, a lot more difficult to overcome.
That gave me chills when you said that nobody's trying to take anything from you. I think that the book that I'm reading says, like, change to a privileged person feels like threat, feels like oppression to them. Right. And I think that that's where a lot of the defensiveness is coming from, is like, oh, well, if we acknowledge this generational trauma, then that might mean that I can't have all the things that I've grown accustomed to having.
Yeah.
And that make me feel safe. And it's what you said, nobody's trying to take any of that from you. And I think people try to start talking about, well, these are things I've overcome. These are the traumas I've experienced. Take full ownership of those. Nobody's trying to take that away. Yeah.
Exactly.
But also I think that we can acknowledge all of it without anybody giving up any of the things that they've experienced.
Right.
And I think to a certain extent that would increase what am I trying to say? I kind of go into like mental health as well, because I feel like the more that we can actually like acknowledge each other and acknowledge and have these moments of like deep, connected, intimate understanding, the less we're going to have rates of depression and anxiety. I feel like that isolation factor is just going to start to melt away. Like this is so key. This moment in history is so key. It's been key for a very long time, but I feel like if we can really like grab onto it in the ways that you and I are talking about and everyone's talking about, I think it can change everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not everybody, right? Not everyone's talking about,
not everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a very, very strong through line, I guess, of white supremacy that runs very, very strongly in this country. And it's very blatant right now, and it's being seen. But I think, just what you're saying, when we can rise and use our voices. And, I put up a post kind of last week at some point, just apologizing for my blatant, there were, this has been an issue that has hurt my heart for a very long time, but I've stayed silent for the most part. I would sit here and get so mad and yell at the people around me maybe, or talk to my friends about how it's so hurtful and why can't people just see people as human beings, and I would all of that, but I wasn't in action. I wasn't out and doing the things that needed to be done to actually make change. And that's on me, because that's privilege. I had the privilege to kind of be like, well, it's not my problem, right? I wish things could be better. One day, maybe I'll do something about it, but I have the privilege to not really have to make it a priority right now. And I'm sorry about that. That's white privilege, and I own that. And, I've been using my platform now very loudly, and people of color have thanked me, and I don't know how to respond, because what I really want to say is I should have been doing this a long freaking time ago. And, you know, like, I feel so, I don't even know how to respond to thank you, because I feel so like I don't deserve thanks. This is what I should be doing. This is what we all should be doing. We all should have each other's backs and be there for each other. And, you know, I think that there's just so many ways that we can do that. And, you know, I have an almost 13-year-old son, and I've made it, you know, I wasn't raised, you know, with parents who taught me this stuff. You know, I kind of somehow came in to this world, just knowing that skin color does not, you know, it doesn't make us more than or less than. It's a difference that we need to appreciate in each other. You know, women, men, different color skin. Like, let's look at each other's differences and be excited about them, right? And rejoice in them. But I vowed to do that differently with my son. And so, you know, look, like, even having conversations with your children, that is a step, right? Like, not having to have a conversation with your children about race is white privilege, right? I think you and I had that conversation one day where I had said, like, and I had this conversation with my son, my 12-year-old son at one point, or maybe he was even younger. And I said, I never have to have the conversation with you about how careful you have to be in the world because of the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. How if you see a police officer, how you have to behave so that you don't get shot or arrested for no reason. Like, I will never have to have that conversation. And as a mother, I will never have to worry about my son the way women of color have to worry about their sons. And that breaks my heart. But that is a conversation that white mothers need to have with their sons, with their white sons. Our children need to understand and see so that they can use their voices and their, you know, whatever ability they have to stand up for one another at a young age. Mm-hmm. Protecting them, I hear a lot like, well, I want my children to be innocent and have it, you know, this innocence. Privilege, that's privilege. If a woman of color, a mother or father of color try to keep their children innocent, I'm pretty sure that makes it more likely that they're going to suffer some sort of injustice.
100%. And I wonder too, I mean, we were talking earlier about that whole experiment with the baby dolls. Like that, like wanting your child to be innocent, like clearly this is something that's showing up when children can't even communicate. You know, this is something that's like, the conversations need to be happening. And I'm curious too, so how old was your son when you had that conversation with him?
Well, that one, he was probably like 11 or 12, but I started talking to him as soon as I could. I mean, there's age appropriate books for 3-year-olds, right? And so, I mean, we were just always in the conversation of the fact that we have different skin colors. And for some people, a lot of people in this world, you know, that is going to be a factor. And look, the way I always saw it is I'm raising a future white man.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to be a white man who understood that he has privilege. And with that privilege comes responsibility as a human being to his fellow human beings. And I wanted him to not only know the facts, but to connect that to emotion, right? I truly believe our kids don't come in with bias. They don't come in seeing skin color as a reason to judge somebody, right? They see the difference. So why not celebrate it, right? Like, so we've always been in the conversation, and I encourage that to everyone. Like, why is talking about skin color a bad thing? Like, when did that become a bad thing? Is it bad to say that you have green eyes and talk about different eye colors? No. Like, why is it a bad thing or an uncomfortable thing to talk about the fact that we have different skin colors? Like, it just, we've been brainwashed to believe that it matters. And it matters to the point that it's a difference that we should acknowledge and celebrate, but it doesn't matter to a point where it makes us better or worse or more than or less than or anything like that.
Agree. Somebody, I'm sure you've heard this before too, when people say, like, I don't understand what's, everything that's going on. I don't see skin color.
Yeah.
It's like,
privilege. You don't have to.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I'm like, and in that statement, you are single-handedly like minimizing all of the experiences that people of color have had because of their different skin color as well. And I think like that is a really good like reframing of like, no, like let's see it and then let's celebrate it.
Yeah.
I think people are afraid to say they see it too, which is privilege, for fear of appearing racist.
Yeah.
Just a lot of rewiring that needs to be happening.
Yeah. Well, there's so much that needs to be happening. So much on so many levels. And that's why it's like, start where you are. Like, so for some people, right, it's learning. For some people it's reading, watching movies, getting the facts straight. But then there's like justice reform and, police reform and all these different systems that need to be dismantled so that every single person in this world is equal under the law. That's what this country is built on.
And I think that that's something that we want to include in the show notes too, is like all these different, as many resources as we can. I think let's put that in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there isn't, this is not just a one-time thing. This is not just a one-way thing. This is many different ways, many different times, like consistently.
Yeah.
So I think that, we'll have a bunch of things included in the show notes of how to get involved, how to educate yourself. I want to include a bunch of books.
And
also like, books and links. People to follow.
Yeah.
I think that's such a huge education piece too, is like who we are following on social media. I know for me, like I have to be really careful with who I'm following on social media, because that's, I forget the person that said this, but we are most like the 5 people that we surround ourselves with. Yeah. And that goes for social media too. So if you want to show up differently, make sure you're feeding your brain and your eyes and your heart differently.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are what we consume, right? And I mean, I think that's the other thing I want to encourage people to do is like, don't just believe what you're being told to believe, right? If you watch Fox, there's a whole different scenario going on than if you watch CNN versus if you watch, right? Like, so you're being told a narrative by wherever you're sourcing your story. And what I want to encourage people to do, find your own narrative, dig, go on Twitter, poke around, put in the hashtags, just see what is being shown. Go into like Google and find the videos that are being shot. We have phone cameras, right? So now we're getting to really see what's actually happening, not what the news is showing us, but what people who are actually on the streets in the protest, experiencing everything that's going on. Watch those videos. Put it all together and form your own narrative. Look for the truth. Don't believe what you're seeing, because even the greatest news stations are not showing the whole thing. You know, we see all the loot, we see the looting, but we have not seen images of the looting of Black neighborhoods by white supremacist groups. I haven't seen that. You know, we see a lot of what, you know, unfortunately fits the narrative that we've lived for so long.
We see what we want to see.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you want to see the truth, you're going to seek out where that is. If you want to see the narrative that you've always seen, you're going to continue to see that.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah.
So be willing to break up your narrative.
Totally. It's, you know, it's the definition of insanity. Like, do the same thing over and over again and expecting to get a different result. Like, at some point, if you want a different result, you're going to have to go outside of what you know and what you've been doing and what you've been listening to and consuming. So yeah, this is go ahead.
I was going to say that I just read something about, like, if you're the same person you were when you at 50 that you were at like 20, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you have the same beliefs and the same everything 30, 40, 50 years later, you are, and I'm going to give it my own words, because this is what I call, you're a zombie. You know, you're one of the sheep. You're just consuming and being herded and just kind of, right? Like, break out of the narrative. Expand, grow, change, learn. That's why you're here.
Totally. Well, you know, with so much more work to be done, I'm humbled to be able to have this conversation with you and to be able to share our perspectives from this privileged space and to try and do better, be better, use our privilege to show up, to be more responsible.
Yeah.
I think a friend of mine once said, responsibility is simply our ability to respond.
Yeah. And
so let's keep doing that. And just to all of our listeners out there, we encourage you to do the same. And know that it's supposed to be uncomfortable. Know that it's messy looking. Know that you're going to have to change your mind about a lot of things and get used to that. And if you have any questions for us, please reach out. Again, we will include all of the links that we can think of, all of the resources in our show notes. But until next time, thank you so much for listening and being part of this deep chat. Jen, thanks for your insight as well.
Yeah, thank you. I just hope everybody's in this conversation and willing to grow.
Yeah. All right, until next time, Deep Chatters.
To all you deep chatters out there, Leah and I want to thank you so much for listening. This is a podcast that's all about connection, so we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram at Deep Chats Podcast. And if you haven't already, please go to iTunes to rate and review us. Every review helps other deep chatters just like you be able to find this podcast.